No issue. These have been really good because I've been able to use these with our coaches too. Like I talk to our coaches a lot about continuing education stuff. So it's really nice to be able to actually have those conversations with them too, because a lot of times they're coaching. So it's really hard to educate while we're coaching. You know what I mean? So they're able to kind of go back and look at some of these things that I'm even talking about, which has been really cool. Plus, we have obviously Chris Gruarin, who's a high school coach. We have some other coaches here that might want to coach in high school at some point. So it's really nice. And then we also have two athletes here that are still in high school that are coaching some of our younger kids. So it's cool to see like they may be able to help their programs with structure and things like that. So again, obviously, thanks for being here. I want to recap the tryout and the practice recap, and then kind of dive a little bit deeper into the practices, because I know that's something that a lot of teams need a little bit more structure with, but I'd like to kind of go over there. So with the tryouts, I know we talked last week. I want to make sure that we're finding some type of measurable stat or some type of grading system that we can figure out and come up with, so that every single guy that comes to your tryout knows where they stand, and you can create the grading system for yourself. But I think this goes towards, like, if we're really trying to grow the program overall over the course of time, kids that don't make the team, how are they, what's going to make them come back out the following year? And for example, if you only take kids on your scale that are 3 and higher, and you have a kid that's a 1 or a 2, being able to tell him, hey, based on the rest of the kids that are here, you're like a 1 or 2 out of 5. And here's what you can do in the next year. And this is what I'm looking for as a coach. So I think for a lot of kids that really want to make baseball their thing, or at least play through high school, having some type of guidance that way, it makes it easy on your part, because you don't really have to do much with it. But it helps those athletes kind of understand, okay, here's where I'm at and here's what I need to get better at. And then over the course of the next year, they can do that. You may
even the metrics come in, the measurables.
Yeah, and I don't know, like for me personally, it's very easy. We do the exit velo stuff, we do the throwing velocity stuff, we do movement screenings and things like that. Like you obviously were able to.
Let me ask you a question. What do you use to? I've read some of the stuff you said, like a radar gun. What do you use? We have a oh man, we have that. It looks like I can't remember the name.
Pocket radar?
Yes, yeah, we have a pocket radar.
That's what we use.
Can you use it for bat velo as well?
It's way better for tee and front toss work. It's very inconsistent on BP stuff, only because if you don't hit it exactly straight, it doesn't get a good read. That's where like the advanced tech comes in. That's really hard, and you guys aren't going to be able to get that kind of stuff. But for tee work, we always use pocket radar. I have a stalker, but I don't. To be honest with you, pocket radar is easier. So I like Pocket Radar. We have an affiliate program with them that we do a lot of selling, for them. But we have 2 of the smart coaches, so we can actually upload that to an iPad that we put on a TV. So
we can project it on the wall of our gym. So a kid, and that's what we did last year, and we did it off tee. We get every kid off a tee, and then every kid saw, this junior got this sophomore got this senior got this.
Yeah, and then for you can range it too. Like for high school varsity athletes, what's a good range based on who you coach? Where are some guys going to be? Like for our guys, I see them very often. Every kid that's in 9th grade or higher, we want to get them to 90 plus as fast as possible. And then if somebody's at 90, our goal is to get them to 100 as fast as possible. Now that's just completely based on the guys that we have. I've got sophomores at 100. I've got juniors at 90. So it just all depends on the guys that you have for your team. So instead of making it like a national scale, make it based on what Newport has. So if your best hitter, that's going to be a 5 out of 5 on your exit velo scale is 90, then everything underneath that will drop into the 4s, the 3s, the 2s, and the 1s, right? And so that kid that gets a 1, let's say he's hitting the ball 68 miles an hour and he's a sophomore, that kid can basically say, all right, maybe I just need to get stronger. Maybe I need to get stronger and I need to hit the ball harder. Okay, perfect. So if those are the 2 things that coach is looking for next year, I can definitely work on those 2 things, right? And so it's very measurable and very easy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Pocket radar was a good purchase.
Pocket radar is great. We do, like, I know you guys all have stopwatches, so a home to first time is really good. A nice little 30-yard dash, maybe a 10-yard dash is good. Maybe a home to second, if you guys can do that's awesome. 60 times.
What about an agility type? I do them in phys ed. There's all kinds of shuttle runs I can do. I could just pick one, but was there one that you prefer for baseball?
We like the 10, the 20, the 40, and the 60, but like I said, we've got laser testers, so it's very easy for us to do that. I think for you, a 5-10-5 would be great.
Okay.
Just because that just kind of shows just typical speed. You know what I mean? It shows their agility and speed. I think that's probably the best one. You know, the difference between a sprint start, a push-up start, and a steal start, I think are awesome too. You know, so I would have them do maybe a steal break for a sprint with time from first to second, and do 3 different starts. You know, do a sprint start, a steal start, and a push-up start, because the push-up start's going to force them to get, you know, in a really good position to run. A sprint start, they're going to be the fastest in the sprint start, but the steal start is what applies to baseball the most. So being able to decipher, like, okay, maybe somebody's 0.5 faster in a sprint start than he is a steal start, or maybe somebody's only 0.2. How do we figure out how to bridge that gap where they can get to their max speed faster? And those are things that are very easy to track in a tryout setting, because it's just 3 sprints. You know, you can use a timer for that. And basically you need to figure out, like, as a coach, like, what's the typical time that it's going to take for a guy to be able to steal. So when we were in college, our coach had times for us from first to second. And what they would do is they would basically say, okay, well, if you were in an elite time, you were green. If you were in the middle, you were yellow. And if you were, you know, a slower time, you were red, and you're never going to steal. You know, so we always used to use the numbers of, if a pitcher was 1.5 to the plate and a catcher's pop time typically is 2.0, you know, you're looking at 3.5 seconds for them to be absolutely perfect for us to get out. So basically the way that we would track it is we would do a steal start and see how quickly we could get from first to second base. And the guys that were, you know, let's say 3.5 and better would be able to run. Let's say the guys that were, you know, 3.6 to 3.9 would be in yellow, and the guys that were 4 seconds or slower would never be able to steal. And you can use those times at tryouts to be like, okay, well, you know, maybe this guy doesn't hit, maybe he's not really going to play position for me, but he's really fast, and I know he might do track, or he might do football or basketball or something like that, so he's athletic. You know, maybe we want to keep this guy as a platoon guy to possibly steal some bases when we need it.
Runner.
Yeah, sure. And all of those positions matter. I mean, you know, like when I was at Canisius, for example, I was a very average runner, very average. I didn't steal a ton of bases, but I got on base a lot. So when we would get into the later innings, my coach would sometimes, if we needed a run, he would pinch run for me. It's even at the college level. And so we would put a faster guy in that could score a run for us, you know. So it doesn't matter, you know, what they're good at, but being able to kind of figure out where everybody is the best. I think that's where a lot of kids get taken off of teams, is they're really qualified in some categories, but because the overall picture maybe doesn't make sense, they don't keep them. But if you have a guy who's lightning fast that you think can be an asset on the bags, you know, especially with there's a re-entry rule, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. One-time re-entry for starters.
There you go. So maybe in like the 4th inning, you enter a guy to run, you score an extra run in the middle innings, and then, you know, you can enter your starter. And so that can be used as an asset kind of as you go, which I think is super important. Throwing velocity, I think, is really important, you know, for pitchers for sure. And then also understanding the splits between the fastball, the breaking ball, and the changeup, because that's going to be your most effective guys. You know what I mean? And those are really big, that you can throw the, like what we do is we put a pocket radar on a tripod that is on, so keep it on continuous, let it go. And then I would have a bullpen chart. So when a guy's throwing live, I would just, if he's going to throw 20 pitches, if that's what you guys do for your tryouts, I would have a 20 pitch bullpen set up for each kid that's going to throw. And every single pitch, I would put what the pitch was, what the speed was, and whether it was a ball or strike. And that would be it. You know, so at the end of it, you can have number ranges on what their pitches are, and you can have strike percentage. So if a kid's a fringe guy for you, and that specific tryout, he threw 65, 70% strikes and his ranges were good, you know, he might have just made a team because his numbers lined up to what you guys are looking for. And let's say
strikes are also a big stat with us.
Bingo. You know, and those are all things that you can track even in a tryout setting too. Like if a guy faces 5 batters and he throws, you know, 1 first pitch strike, he might not be a guy that's gonna be able to pitch for you. Or if he is, it's going to be on a Tuesday against a non-league team just to get some innings, so you're not, you know, blowing some arms out, right? And so having that information and then providing it to them, I think is the one thing that overall, like baseball in general, can do a better job of, because then the kid doesn't have, like, it's knowing your numbers, right? And so the kid doesn't have any way to come back to you and say, well, you just don't like me, or, you know, or I had a really bad tryout, or whatever the case is. It's like, here are the numbers, here are the facts. And this is where you stack up compared to the rest of the guys that we actually kept on the team, you know, and you can get as deep as you want in this. Like, you know, at Hot Corner, what we do is we put ranges together for where all our athletes are based on age level. So we have exit velocity ranges off the tee, front toss, and batting practice for every single kid that has done hitting with us. at every single age level. So we know what our ranges are at each specific age level. And then there's obviously going to be your outliers. You know, like I said, I've got a sophomore that hits a ball 100 miles an hour. He's an outlier for sophomores. You know, so those kinds of kids don't really fit on the scale, but I'm also not trying, I can't try to get everybody to that same range. But if I have, you know, the majority of the kids are in the mid to high 80s, maybe even hitting 90 at that age, you know, we're doing pretty well. And being able to have that range kind of can help the kids understand where they stack up on the team, rather than them just leaving there saying, I had a great tryout and I just didn't make it. Or if it's like, hey, you're primarily an outfielder, your throwing velocity is 70 miles an hour. The 5 guys that I kept for outfield are throwing 78 to 85 miles an hour on varsity. That's one of the factors. You know, your sprint speed was, you know, 3.8 seconds to second base, and their sprint speed was, you know, 3.5. You know, so they're 0.3 of a second faster and throw 10 miles an hour harder. So it has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It has 100% to do with, I just don't think you're ready at this moment. So you're either going to be a JV guy or you have to try out again next year. Right. And so that makes the conversation a little bit easier too. And I think for you guys, it also kind of tells you like where as a team are we a little bit deficient or where are we really good this year? You know,
That's more what we use it for, because we don't get a lot of kids out. We don't have to make cuts. But
right.
we do use it when we test out a sophomore who we think can help us, and then maybe our expectation was a little higher than what his was,
For sure.
and now metrics will reveal, you know, maybe he's not ready yet.
Well, especially in the high school setting, it's going to be really hard to do a lot of development, right? Because you get practice for 2 weeks and you start playing games. So development's going to be really hard. So you're kind of taking the athletes and the kids with where they are right now. So the numbers that they kind of come to you with are what you have, you know. So like from a coaching strategy standpoint, you know, you're going to fluctuate year after year on what you have. You know, I remember like when I was at Canisius, our first year, we weren't very fast, you know, but we could hit, like we could really hit. But we didn't win as many games as we could because we weren't that quick. So we weren't able to cause any chaos on the base pass. But then, you know, the years after that, we were very fast, like a very fast team. So we were able to cause a ton of havoc, steal a lot of bases, bunt a good amount, hit and run a lot. And that caused a lot more run scoring opportunities. So they recruited that way. And then on top of that, we were able to actually like, you know, really find our niche of what our strategy for our team was going to be, get on base and, you know, cause havoc. And that really helped. You know, so understanding kind of who you have and what you have is really important. And then the kids that don't fit into that mold may be the ones that don't play. So if you don't have to make cuts, maybe it's just the kids that you're on the team because I think you're valuable, but you're not going to play all the time because you don't fit into what our mold is. Right. And I think that's really important too. So I think
my biggest drawback and what we don't do is those kids that are what you just described with you're not going to play, but you know, you might pinch run. I'll get you 10 at bats a year. I'll get you in a situation where you can play late in the game. But you got to be happy with that. We do explain that, but then we don't do it starts with me. I don't do a very good job of finding a place or a plan for them to go from junior year to senior year and bring those metrics up to where they need to be so that they can start the next year. And what we do is, because we don't have a lot of kids coming out, those juniors just assume, hey, I'm going to play, I'm a senior. Yep. And sometimes that's the case because we don't have kids that are juniors pushing them. Once in a while, there's a group of sophomores and juniors that are heads and shoulders above, and they just unseed those seniors. And that's tumultuous as far as chemistry and culture.
For sure.
So I have to do a better job of, from, let's say, late August to February 1st.
The challenge that you're always going to run into no matter what is being able to take the guys that are juniors and basically, and this happened to me, and this was actually probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me as a player, but it's basically saying to those kids, nothing is guaranteed just because you made the team this year. Mm-hmm. Just because you were on the team this year and you made it and you started does not mean at all that you're going to start next year. And I think it's more of they might start. I have no idea. It's probably more of the perception that's being given to them than the actual action of it, because maybe that's going to force them to push. I was very lucky. I had some really, really good guys behind me when I played at Canisius. I had my work cut out for me every single week. I mean, it was a weekly thing for me. But I think the biggest thing was that my coach would always, in a positive way, would always basically say, this isn't guaranteed for you next week. So if you're not actually working during the week, like there's a good chance like I'm going to play the guy that technically is my backup because he's just as prepared, if not more prepared. So I think it's more of the backup guys understanding that they might even have a chance to play if they outperform. You know what I mean? And those are the things I think that pushes the older guys. Like we saw the transition even when I was in high school. When I was in high school, it was the same thing. We had some really good talent, but it was the same thing that you're saying. Like when I was a junior, I knew I was going to start no matter what. It didn't matter what I did, you know. But I wanted to play in college, so that was my driving force was because I wanted to play Division I baseball, so that drove me. But you know, it didn't matter. I could just show up and I was going to play. But I think for, you know, as this years went on, like my brother's class, for instance, 4 years later, they were loaded with talent. And it was the same thing. Like if you were a senior, there was a good chance you weren't going to play. You know, I think I remember when I was in high school, we had a senior that I don't know, even know if you could do it in New York State, but he played junior varsity, you know, because he just wasn't ready to play on varsity with us. You know, it doesn't make you a bad player. It was just that we were so loaded up with people that it was, you know, you kept them down. And that set the standard for everybody else that was coming up that like, this isn't guaranteed for you, you know. And that's the one thing I think from a culture standpoint, if you can implement that, you know, even the guys that come back this year that say, hey, I'm just going to start. So I'm going to go and like kind of go halfway through tryouts and do whatever. And I'm just probably going to make the team anyway. Like, getting a grade that basically says that you're not up to par is going to be a really, really big eye opener for a lot of those guys. You know, like imagine a senior that started for 2 years for you that comes in and he's like 10th in throwing velocity or 10th in exit velocity or, you know, 8th in sprint speed. He's probably going to look at you and be like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to play. It's like, I don't know, man. Like these are some numbers that we're going to look at for our team this year. And from a strategy perspective, you don't line up, you might not, you know? So I know it's hard because of how many kids you might have, but as the program builds, like hopefully you can start building it from 7th grade all the way up through varsity. But as the program builds, I think
that comes back this year. This COVID killed us, and you know, it's an excuse, but we get our mods back this year. So we'll have a 7th and 8th grade team. We'll have a 9th and 10th grade team. I'll take the 2 best sophomores. I've already expressed an interest in them, and then, you know, we'll start to measure. The first thing we're going to do. I got our AD working on getting some space in the Wilson house up there at Niagara Catholic.
Oh, there you go. Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah, so we'll get that, and tough to run on that though because it's a sandy surface. But
yeah, it's really hard.
If everyone has the same testing site, it doesn't matter. You know, I'll make sure. That maybe I'll, you know, if you do the push-up lead, there's not so much slipping, right?
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. So like, those are some things that you can use, but you know, having that facility is going to put you heads above some of the other teams, even in your league that don't have anything. You know, those are little things like that can really make a difference too.
There's 7, we have 9 teams in our league. There's 7 turf fields.
Yeah.
They're out there in, you know, late February, all through March. As soon as it's above 40, they're all outside, not us.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that helps for sure, you know, for those schools, obviously. I think for each individual case and scenario, you know, you got to kind of make best with what you have. When I was at Canisius, and this is really good. Like, even if players listen to this, like we did our infield work on a gym floor at the Division I level for 4 years. We had 1 cage, we had a drop down cage, but we had like kind of 2 cages, I guess. We did all our bunting work off the machine on the gym floor. We did all our sprint work on the gym floor. Our throwing work was on the gym floor. So, you know, we were up against the same, you know, barriers. When I was at Niagara, you know, they've got the turf now, which is really nice, but unfortunately,
beautiful place. Yeah.
It was even worse when I was at Niagara, unfortunately, because we shared the training center with the club teams and the students, you know, so we only had a certain amount of time to be able to use the cages and use the space. You know, same thing. I mean, we're doing first and third plays in a basketball gym, you know, so the same barriers you deal with at Niagara and Canisius, which are the premier teams in the area, you know, you're dealing with at the high school level too. So it's just being able to manage that the best we can, you know, even from a practice perspective, you know, trying to maximize our practice time the best we can, I think is the most important thing. Which kind of brings me to really what I wanted to talk about is practicing, preparation to it, and kind of what to cover. So I'm going to screen share the Williamsville East practice plan that they had on May 29th of this year. I was in the background, stuff with Joe Mack this year for the draft. So I was very intertwined with East, but basically the biggest thing is, what are we trying to accomplish at each practice based on the information that we had in the past? So before I get into the depths of this one, I'll talk a little bit about preparation for the season. So preparing for the season, I think we've got a number one, like you and I talked about it, which was great, where we discussed basically like what team do we have and what are we trying to accomplish. A really cool stat number that I got from Williamsville East this year, they had 100 stolen bases and 1 against. Obviously they were very fortunate to have Joe behind the plate, but they were a very, very fast team. They had 100 stolen bases in like 16, 17 games this year. So they were able to use that. And if you look through this practice plan, they did a lot of base running station work. It's something that, we did at Canisius all the time. And I know that Chris is very big on it. So obviously they add those in there. But from a defensive perspective, I think the biggest things that you could really go over just for yourself as a team is PFPs. So the pitcher fielding practice work, making sure that they're actually able to do the things that they need to do. Double plays. So understanding what type of double plays each position is going to do. First and third plays. And then from team defense perspective, infield, outfield, cuts and relays, bunt defenses. If you're going to add in any type of trick plays, I know depending on time, like there are people that add in either hidden ball trick stuff or, things like that. You can do that, or even on
our Friday thing. So
yeah, right. Which is really cool. And I think it adds a fun aspect to it too. And they need that. And then understanding different positions, because what happens if a guy goes down and you need to move positions, he still has general scheme. So those are the things defensively that I think are really important to cover. Offensively, hit and runs, moving runarounds, and then any type of score runner. So run on third base, infield in, run on third base, infield back, first and third offense. And as I get deeper into this, I'll talk about how you can do first and third offense and first and third defense at the exact same time, which I think is super valuable, depending on how much time you guys have for practice. And then base running. So doing different steal breaks, angled turns, going from first to third and home to second. So the different turns there. Hard turns around first to read the outfield. So setting the standard for hard base running no matter what. And then going from second to home and when to send guys from a coach's perspective. So what to do with 0, 1, and 2 outs. And that's stuff that we got to practice too, because if your team knows, okay, 2 outs, I'm on second base. I know coach is going to send me because there's 2 outs. I'm going to mentally go even harder. Right. Or, if there's no outs and you've got the big part of your lineup coming up here, you may want to hold off a little bit on sending that guy to second base. So that he has to have a really good jump and he's got to wait for you and kind of just hang and read. So those are some things that you can run into at practice. I think is really important. So if we go to, their practice plan, this is when they were about to, win the sectional. So, the Williamsville East dog pile. So it's mentally preparing the dog pile. So, they had their pre-practice talk, their dynamic warm-up, team stretch. So they do that every single time. And I think it was a really, really good structure because they waited for every single guy to do their team practice and dynamic warm-up. Chris ran through it with them the first few times. And then after that, obviously they were able to do it themselves. And then he talked about, having high energy and productive practice and competing, so those are the mental things that he talked about. And then obviously went through who was going to throw bullpens for that day, which I think was really important because those are the things that each practice, it's very easy to get away from when guys are going to throw pens, so even leading up to, their sectional playoff, they only had 1 game left, but they still had all their guys staying on the structure for what he created. After that, they went to the base running stations. And this was the one thing that we were really good at was creating good base running. So, he talked about who was going to be at first base. They had their first baseman and one of the coaches actually covering first. They had their second baseman working on daylights, and then at home they had just the coach because there was going to be no contact at home. But they talked about at first base stealing second. So what a read is, what a first move is, and a fake break. And my guess is that there'd be a left-handed pitcher up just because they were doing reads and first move stuff. So they're probably either going to face a left-handed pitcher or they were struggling against left-handed pitching on stealing. So that's why they added that into their first base work that day, which allows them to understand, from a coaching perspective, you can add in, if you're going to give a steal sign, you can also add a secondary sign for whether you're going to force them to go first move or a read. Right. So that's the kind of things that you can allow them. Or if you give the steal sign with a left-handed pitcher throwing, it's always going to be first move. If you give them the green light, it could be a read. Those are kinds of things that you can add in from your signs depending on how you're going to coach it. At second base, they had the second baseman working on pickoffs with the pitcher, and they had the base runners actually working on stealing third. So looking at the different number of looks that the pitcher was giving back to second base, most pitchers get into a habit of doing 1 to 2 looks. You don't really see a lot of guys go 0 or 3. If a guy is going to look 3 times, he's going to pitch immediately after that, so you can steal. So understanding the typical ideas on how often a pitcher is going to look at you and what tendencies he's creating, those are really good to work on in practice. And then actually working on secondaries, gaining ground, keeping the feet moving from second base, or stuff that they worked on. So they culminated defensive work, and pitcher pickoffs while they were also working on base stuff. So they're actually maximizing the time with all the guys that they had. And then at home plate, so they had the guys doing base stealing and, picks and reads, with the infielders. And then at home, they were doing bunt work, they were bunting, sacrifice, safety, squeezing, and getting down the lines. So they had another group of guys doing bunt work with another first and third baseman, so that the pitchers could communicate and the guys could actually get their bunting practice in. So if you look at that from the 15 minutes to start practice,
who threw the bunts?
They would have a coach. So Coach G probably threw the bunts. They didn't have a catcher. They don't really need a catcher, because I do believe that Joe was catching bullpens at that time. So so basically you have a coach throwing BP. You have your second coach being the other first baseman, so that you can do picks and reads, and then you have another first and third baseman doing bunt plays, no catcher, and then you have your middle infielders doing another picks and reads. So you could have 3 pitchers working at the same time. You could have a pitcher fielding bunts, a pitcher doing pickoffs to first, and a pitcher doing pickoffs to second, all at the same time. So now you've got 3 pitchers. You've got, every infielder that's out there except for a catcher, because he's catching pens, and you've got base runners. So, and some of the outfielders are going to go from bunting to first base to second base to bunting to first base to second base. So it's creating that station work and what groups those guys are going to be in, and then allowing them to actually get out there and practice on what they're trying to accomplish. And this is a very similar structure to what we would do daily at Canisius. We would basically take 3 or 4 groups, depending on how many guys you have. So if you've got 12 guys on your team, you could have, 4 guys doing strictly defense. So you could have your third baseman, your second baseman, your shortstop, and your first baseman. So there's 4. You could have 4 base runners. You could have 4 guys bunting, and you could have 4 guys on the mound. You could switch it up any way that you want. But being able to actually maximize the practice time by doing all their picks and reads looks, all their pickoff plays, all their bunting, and all their base running in 15 minutes maximizes that time. And he might go over by 5 to 10 minutes if something looks off, but they were able to get all that work in so quickly. If you have a machine, you could also have, maybe a kid that's injured or somebody that's not doing anything for practice that day, feed the machine to do bunts. There are a lot of ways that you can skin it. But this was the reason why I liked this practice so much, was because he was maximizing, the time that he had in that 15 minutes to get base running, picks, reads, looks, and bunts all done at the same time. So now once that's done, you can move on to something a lot more productive as a culminating team that'll get you ready. So that to me, what I took from that was that he was basically just trying to maximize his time, get as much done as he could, and develop, so that if there was something that popped up, he could elaborate on it. So I know it's a lot, but those are the kinds of things that even if you have 2 coaches at practice, you can get a lot of stuff done as long as you systemize it the way that you want it, right? So I really like that. You got anything on that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to how it'll fit with me. This is something we try to do each day, and then you walk in and time and space, and then you get another kid. It's like, oh, my arm's sore, I can't do it.
But if the arm's sore, he could run, right? And those are the things that you can do. So basically, like, the way that they did this is they put their starting infield out there. They had all the outfielders bunt and do base running, and then they had 3 or 4 other guys that pitch would stay on the mound. So like I think this Trey McClay and this Zedro, both of those guys were throwing bullpens later. So they probably just did the picks and looks with those guys before they got ready to go throw. So those are things that, depending on how your structure is for practice, those are things that you can actually implement and do it very quickly to make sure it's just something that we're polished on. And the one thing that I will say is that they ran into some pickoff plays and they ran into some bunt plays that they're pretty prepared for. And all it was adding it in a few times a week. It wasn't anything crazy for 15 minutes. It's just keeping it fresh in the mind. From there, they got into their throwing work. So they actually did all of this stuff prior to their throwing work because the throws are very light, especially and I don't think they did any rundown stuff. I think that they just did, picks and reads and pickoffs and stuff like that. They do the throwing work with a purpose. So with the way that he talked about it, which I am very big on, is doing position specific throwing for 3 minutes. So basically, like, if I have the ball and I'm a shortstop, I'm going to put the ball in my mitt. I'm going to act like I'm fielding a ground ball, come up and make a strong throw this to my partner, who should be another infielder. When that infielder catches it, he's either doing a cut relay, he's doing a double play feed. If he's a first baseman, he's acting like he's stepping on, he's catching the ball out in front like he's at first base. So it's adding very, very good movements to their catching. As they're warming the arms up, so when I played short, I would do backhand straight up and forehand plays by myself with the ball in my mitt. And then when I got the return throw, I would do double play feeds from second, cut plays. And I would also do double play feeds as if I was a shortstop as well. So I would add those into my catch play. So when I caught the ball from my partner, I was doing something productive as if I was treating it like a game. So then what happens is you don't have to work on cuts and relays nearly as often in practice because I'm doing it in my throwing work. You don't have to work on double plays, footwork as much. You can just do culminating team double plays. You don't have to work on double play footwork nearly as much because I'm getting that in my throwing work. So the goal behind this is basically taking what he's able to do and what I would be able to do in 25 minutes. A lot of coaches take full practices to do that. So basically in those 25 minutes, like, we've already gotten our position specific work, our footwork's down, our hand work is down, all of our, like I said, base running stuff, picks, bunts, plays, those are all done in 25 minutes. And that's kind of how you keep it very, very structured. And it looks like from this practice that was a culminating team practice, part of practice. And then as he gets lower, so, at 10:35, they were doing individual work. So the infielders were going to stretch it out. They're going to throw to a target. This is probably when they did some long toss stuff. It looks like he was doing cutoffs this day, some quick hand stuff where they were competing for quick hands. And then they were getting into their hands drills. So they're now, after they're done throwing, they're going into their everyday drills. So that's what EDD stands for in
Right,
here.
everyday drills, right? Yeah.
Yep. So everyday drills. And then the outfields were doing kind of some QB stuff. They were doing turnarounds over the shoulders. If you only have one coach, you can have the outfielders do the everyday drills with each other. I know when I was at Niagara, that's what we did. We didn't have the coaches do that. We had the coaches actually monitor and oversee that. And we had the players do the drills themselves. Then all you have to do is basically oversee to make sure that they're doing it to the intent that you want, instead of you actually focusing on throwing the ball. Now you can't see what the infielders are doing. A lot of times those guys aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's when you run into some issues there. So, feed it where you create the culture that the athletes have to do it themselves and hold each other accountable for that. Every days, I don't know what you plan to do for every days, but for infielders, we do short hops, straight up forehands, backhands, and then we would kind of stretch it out and do some ground balls so they could actually work on their footwork to get around a ground ball. Those are the things that I think are really valuable.
Use the spots on the field or the cones, or you just kind of just put a ball down around it.
No, so I would have them go on 2 knees either with or without a glove, depending on your time constraints, and do, 5 short hops in front, 5 forehands in front, short hops, and 5 backhand short hops. That's to get the hands moving. I would get them into a fielding position where they could actually work on, their foot and their glove work from a standstill. And then as they move back, you'd have your partner roll it to them and they could actually field and do their work that way. And that's kind of how you get your everydays in. So it's basically saying it's the same thing as us hitting off a tee, right? So for a hitter hitting off a tee, that's all the everydays are. So the everydays are basically, this is my tee work for my position. So it's allowing us to warm our bodies up, warm our hands up, warm our feet up, to actually perform at a high level at our position, just as if I was going to hit off the tee, then do front toss, then do BP. So you can create that. My recommendation would be to do anything that's done on the knees I would either do with a small mitt, so like a Valley training mitt. I know I had the hat on earlier, but a Valley training mitt, like a flat glove or a small glove where they can work on their hands.
Yeah,
Or you have a small glove.
we use the paddles.
Yep. So those are good. And then, you could do, when you get on your feet, you can put your glove on and actually do your footwork that way. And then for the outfielders, you can change it up. You can do angle drills, you could do turnarounds, you could do zigzags, QB drills. You could do the footwork stuff. If you could have them go out and throw them a nice easy fly ball, or they could work on their footwork, throwing back in the infield. You can add a list of every days that you want. It could be something as simple as this, where like I know Chris posts this in his on a like a little cork board in the dugout, and then the kids can come and see, okay, so after we're done throwing, here are the everyday drills we're doing today. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go out there. Coach is going to monitor that and hold us accountable, and we can go and get our stuff done. So, now you're looking at it 40 minutes into practice, and we've gotten a lot of work done already. And then as the pitchers are throwing their bullpens, like in this specific day, they're doing defensive work. And I can see right now the defensive stuff is very, very, very similar to what we did when I was in school. I'll blow
Thanks.
this. Yep.
Thanks. Us
So-
old guys can't see.
Oh, no worries. No worries. So the infield double fungo work, basically the pitchers would stay at home plate and feed to the coaches, and we'd have two coaches here. So you'd have 6-4-3 ground balls, 5-3s, and 3-2s. So you'd have a shortstop getting a grounder, a third baseman getting a grounder, and then you'd have a first baseman getting a ground ball. So you need two coaches for that. You probably have one coach hit the short, another coach hit the third, and then the coach that hit the shortstop would hit the first, and you just run it. You go 6-4-3 double plays. As soon as the 6-4-3 is done, there's a 5-3 coming, and as soon as the guy catches it at first base for that second, the 5-3, he's getting a ground ball to throw back to the catcher for a force play at home. And you just run it, and you have two coaches hitting those, and you can get a ton of work in. And you can flip it around, so you can go 5-4-3s to 6-3s to 6-3-1s. So the 6-3-1 is a pitcher, so you probably need a pitcher to cover. And then 4-6-3s, and then 5-3 slow rollers. So you'd have the whole right side of the infield and shortstop working on double plays, while the third baseman's working on a slow roller throw to first base. And so that's how you can get mass ground balls in while you're working on regular throws, while you're also working on double plays and slow rollers. So what that does, it kind of culminates where you got two coaches that are hitting the multiple spots, but that's going to allow you to actually like really maximize your infield time, instead of just having buckets at, the 4-hole and the 6-hole, hitting some grounders and having them throw it in a bucket. You can actually have them get some throwing work in there too. And then for the outfield, depending on if you have a third coach, you could have them split into two lines and do some fly ball communication. I know for these guys, the infield outfield fly ball communication was somewhere where they needed some work. So I know that's why he added this in there. So basically put them in two separate lines. He would hit a fly ball right in the middle, and they could fight over it and let them communicate and talk about it. I know that they did that from infield to outfield. I know they did that with the outfield to the outfield. And I think that was a really good drill to kind of get them going. So up to this point, I know it's mostly defensive and base running work, but like I said, you're an hour into practice and your whole defense is completely done. So during this time, as he gets past all the defensive stuff, so it's basically maximizing our time that we have with those guys within the first hour. Once he gets into the next type of work, he's going to have the outfielders going to the cage. So he has a focus for the day. So the guys that are hitting off the tee, they're hitting line drives to the back of the net. That's the goal for that day. They can see that. And then cage 2, they're doing underhand flips, but they're working middle away. So it's basically adding some type of focus to that. And then the outfield of defensive work is, again, fly ball communication. So we had two different cage sections where you'd split those. And then he also had some other people going into, the infielders were doing some other stuff at that time. That he had. So that was an easy way for him to actually get those things done. So from a practice perspective, it was getting some swings in towards the end, making sure the defensive stuff was working. With this specific team, they were very, very good offensively. So they didn't need to spend as much time in practice hitting. But I did want to get into talking about like any type of culminating team defense. So basically culminating team defense could be defensive BP, which I'll talk about in a little bit, a 2-pitch game, a 3-2 game, or any type of live scrimmage. So I'll talk about the lower three, and then I'll get back to defensive BP in a second. So 2-pitch, basically you put a defense out on the field, no pitcher, because you'll have a coach throwing BP. So you have 8 positions on the field. Everybody else on the team will hit at that time. The 2-pitch game is they get 2 pitches no matter what the results are. So if they put the first pitch in play, they're done. If they foul the second pitch off, miss, or put it in play, they're done. But they're running it out as if they're making the play. So basically, it's allowing your hitters to be more aggressive. They only get 2 pitches. Obviously, there's a little bit on the coach to throw a strike or the machine if you guys have a machine. But it's giving them 2 pitches to be able to do that. It was something that we did at Niagara a lot that I really liked. And then the 3-2 game is very simple. You got 3 balls, 2 strikes. If you walk, you go to first. If you get a hit, you go to first. If you hit the ball in play, you got to run it out. If you strike out, you strike out. If you foul the ball off, you're still in the box. But 3-2 game goes a lot faster because you could throw 3 pitches, get 3 outs, and then they got to switch and rotate. You could also do a live scrimmage. Live scrimmage normally takes a little bit more time than doing all the other stuff that Chris did in the practice earlier. But you could do a live scrimmage where you put 2 teams together. If you're limited on guys, you can take away a pitcher and take away a catcher. And if you have 14 guys on your team, you could run 7-on-7, and actually run a live scrimmage with outs to see kind of who your starters are going to be. Or you can run A team versus B team. You could mix them to have other guys working with different people. But those are the 3 very easy ones. My favorite is defensive BP. So basically the whole gist of defensive BP is you're putting situations that the coach is putting with base runners on base. And they're changing. You can change the situations whenever you make defensive changes, or if you want to get, every defense to work on certain things. You're putting different players in other defensive positions because you're limited on space and guys, but you can actually add 2 different teams. Or you're changing the different hitting scenarios to allow the hitters to work on different things. This also gives you a time as a coach to put on plays while they're runners in position. So you could actually go to third base if you have another coach throwing BP, and you can give signs. So what I would do every week, I would go to Williamsville East and throw BP for Chris so that he could actually give signs from third base to his hitters so that it was more like a game situation. So for this defensive BP, what he wanted to work on was runners at first base primarily, first and second, and then second and third. And I know for time constraints, what he did is he just put 2 specific teams together. So he had his, 8 positions on the field here, and then the other 8 guys would hit. So what he did there is basically make sure that he had 2 specific teams, and he didn't make it out specific. He had a runner on first base no matter what. A hitter would come up, we would mix it, throw fastballs, breaking balls, and changeups. They would hit. If they got a hit, they started with a runner on first base again. They didn't play it out as if, there was, 2 guys on now. And then he would change that. He would go run on first and second, then run on second and third. And once he was able to get through all the things he wanted to accomplish, he would flip-flop the teams and restart. And kind of what that did was it allowed both the starters and the backups to be able to actually get good reps and would allow the hitters to hit in situations. And after all the defensive work that they've already done in practice, they're able to actually have some type of competitive game towards the end where they're trying to execute a certain situation. And I think this is a really good place for you to implement maybe a place that you guys might struggle. So first and third offense is the toughest, one of the toughest positions to be in, first and third with 1 out, because you're 1 pitch away from being out of the inning. You're also 1 hit away from blowing the whole game open. So first and third situations are a great one. Second and third with the infield playing in is another great one, because that's a really good time for, you to actually see if a guy can come through and not just hit a sacrifice fly, but actually drive a baseball in that situation and lay off some breaking balls because first base is open. It's a really good position for you to actually see where your team's at and what situations you're good at, and then use the games that you had prior to figure out where you struggled. So those are the things that I really like about practice structure, is actually coming up with how much time you're allotting to certain things and how structured you're going to be within that to make sure that you're maximizing it. So like I said, base running, picks, and pickoff plays and bunts were all done at the same time. So now it's not everybody's doing picks, everybody's doing bunts, everybody's doing steal starts. You're able to do it all at the same time, which saves you time towards the end to do something a little bit more game specific, if that makes sense.
Yeah. My head's spinning.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of stuff, and I wanted to get it all out here, and I wanted to use this specific practice.
Let's go back to your team defense where you're hitting 2 fungos.
Yeah.
So you got All right, so that's 20 minutes. So what you're doing is you're putting a fungo coach on one side of home
Yep.
and another guy on the other side of home with his own bucket, and you got a pitcher there feeding.
You got a pitcher on both sides. So you got a
Right,
pitcher.
one for each coach, one for each
Yep.
coach. Okay, guy on the right, on the third base side, the right-handed fungo, the guy in the right-handed box or just off to the side, whatever. He hits to 6. They go 6-4-3. Immediately when 3, typically you'd have two first basemen. That guy jumps off, throws back to the guy at home. And the new guy's in there, and the other guy, he hits to third, and we go third to first. And then the other guy takes over.
Or because you could even do it where the guy that just caught the ball from the 5-3 can drop the ball and move right up, and he's ready for a ground ball to throw home.
Yeah, so like a squeeze play or some type of force at home or something on a high chopper or something. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So then let me get this because these are the type of drills that kids love because it's movement. We're going. And as soon as we say to them, don't blink, because if you know what, if you're not paying attention, you might catch one in the head.
Yep.
You gotta know what you're doing. And that's how we like them to play instead of like watching paint dry. So
you could also in this specific practice too, like he structured this pretty well. But if you look at the first ones, all of the first ones, you can take out that 3. So instead of throwing to first, you could do 6-4, 5-3, 3-2. So you could just go, shortstop to second base, hold, third base to first base, and then first base to home. So you can do it that way too. If you only have one first baseman, I would recommend doing it that way so that you're not over leveraging that first baseman, so you can actually still get some good work in.
We're crowded at first.
So then for you, it doesn't matter. Like you could have 3 first basemen and each of them could take an individual one themselves.
We actually have to take one of our first and turn them into a third baseman.
There you go. So with this scenario for you could work. We would do 6-4s, 5-3s, and then 5-4, 6-3s, and then 4-3, 3-6s. So we would add in some 3-6s in there too, where we'd have the first baseman turn double play just to shortstop. So you could add in those.
I don't want to sound stupid or anything, but 6-3-1. So you hit the short, you go to first.
I think it's supposed to be it's supposed to be 6. It's supposed to be either a 6-3 to 3-1. I'm sorry. So he added the 6 in there. So the shortstop's going to throw to first. The first baseman's going to get a ground ball and flip to a pitcher. So he added that 6 in there, which is not
like
great.
A PFP, right?
Yeah, like
it couldn't be a 6 there.
Yeah, so it'd be a 5-4-3 and then a 6-3 and a 3-1.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only similar thing we do is we do a little chaos drill where it involves PFPs and then to give them kind of recover, we go, it's the same type of thing, but it's only one fungo.
Mm-hmm. So you can have more
love it. That sometimes is our culminating activity. All right, let's do some chaos because it's movement.
And so like what he tried to do and what I try to do when I run practices, like structured practices outdoors, is I really try to do a good job of getting all of that stuff done in the first hour. So my whole goal is to get it done within the first hour to hour and 15 minutes so that we can move into a culminating team game. And if we really struggled, like if we did not do well defensively, then I would go into a culminating team defensive drill. So I would do an IO, or I would do double cuts, or I would do cuts and relays with hitting balls and gaps and splitting gaps and making them work. Like that's if we really struggled. But if we're kind of rolling or we're doing pretty well, or I think that, foundationally we're in a good place, I would go into, a defensive BP or a 2-pitch game or a 3-2 game, just because like even the 3-2 game, if you play it out like 7 innings, 2 teams, 3-2 game, I mean, you're going to get that done in 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Unless you have a team that just keeps raking, but it's 3-2. How many guys are going to miss hit balls in 3-2? And then if you add in breaking balls, like I don't know what you guys do in practice, but if you're throwing fastballs, they may do okay. But what I try to do is add in fastball curveball, even if it's not a great one. Like if I can just add in something off speed, keeps them on their toes, it keeps it more game like. You're going to get more guys that are going to miss hit balls that way. So I think that's the best thing to add in at the end of practice if you can. down here is doing some sort of culminating, hitting and defensive game at the same time. Because you got to figure the majority of the time, especially in like high school, is they should or they will hit the ball harder, more consistently off of BP than they will in the game.
Right.
So they're going to get way better reps in a defensive BP scenario than they are going to be obviously in a regular practice setting where a coach is hitting a fungo.
Yeah, I like putting runners on too, because then you're always trying to think, you're playing second base, like, well, if he bunts, I got first, but I still got to hold for a double play.
Yep. Yep. So I like all that. I think it's really good. I think it allows them to stay engaged. The biggest thing that I see in here, like a little bit more like what I look for in a practice plan is the bullpens here. Like he had it structured on who was throwing the bullpens. And my guess, because I know that these two guys were throwing later, I know that Cooper and Skidmore probably threw the bullpens while everybody else was doing this other stuff at the very beginning. Because it looks like Joe wasn't in any of the practicing, at least at the very beginning with the culminating team stuff. So the way I see it is they probably had two guys throwing pens early, and then the other two guys would throw their pens later, and I think their game schedule said, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday games. And I think this was a Saturday practice from what I understand. So they're able to on Saturday throw pens because those are going to be the guys that we're going to have to be ready on, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week. And then
that was the Saturday before their first round of sectionals.
Yeah.
So they and I do the same thing. When he put on the whole week with the understanding, expectations, if we play well, we should be playing next Saturday in finals.
Yep.
And I do the same thing. I put the state finals on our schedule every year.
And so we did that when I was at Canisius too. We did the regional and all that stuff.
Yeah, you put your regional because we expect to be there.
We're going to be there. We're going to be there. Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest thing I think for you guys. And then honestly, it's setting that standard right away. When you get those guys for that first practice, it's like, I think he even put up here, look, Williamsville East dog pile. It's right there on the top of the practice plan. We're dogpiling this week. We're going to have a high energy, productive practice, and we're going to compete. And that's what we're doing right now. That's it, period. That's the goal for today. And that's what we're going to accomplish. And so and then during the practice, because a lot of them are doing stuff on their own, you just hold them accountable. Like, hey, was that read? Was that a championship read right there? Was that championship steal break? You know what I mean? Were you in position in there? And those kinds of things is what's going to, drive to win the sectional championship and, moving forward from there, because now the kids at practice are like, man, this practice is really hard. You know what I mean? This practice is hard because I'm competing harder in practice and I'm going to compete in the games. That's what changed my life. Like when I was in high school, I had no idea what.
But by this point, this is the last week of the season. You got to teach those drills. And you got to take some really, really hard, time to say, this is how we do it. This is why we're doing it. This is the intent, purpose of the drill. And this is where you go when you're done. And so then when you get to the part where you're outside finally and you're out of the gym, you can go, okay, this is the name of the drill. Name the drill, boom, they bounce right into it.
Yeah, or like, and you got to pick how long it's going to take for you to actually teach that. So for example, like the infield every day and the outfield every day is like, they should be able to have all that stuff done by themselves within the first week.
Right.
Done. Whether you're indoors or outdoors, they're done. Because, we know that this is what it's going to take and this is what our everydays look like. And for a lot of the guys that are playing travel, they're doing that stuff at their practices anyway. So they should know to some capacity what you're trying to accomplish. Right. So, I wanted to make sure that was something that we covered big. I got one thing left is, making sure that each practice during the week that you guys have post game is structured towards the things that you may have struggled with right away after the game, so you can attack it. Those are the things that I think really helps teams grow as the season goes on. A lot of times when we have one day to practice, it's very light, and you can keep it light. But the one recommendation I have and what really worked for me was cleaning up the things that we struggle with. So for example, I put on here, cleaning up offensive production that doesn't include hits, so situational offense, base stealing, making sure we're taking extra bases on pass balls, wild pitches, and pitches in the dirt at all. you know, those types of things, or extra bases on booted ground balls and fumbled outfield play. And that stems back to the hard around first thing that I talked about earlier, is making sure that we're going hard around first every single time. Because if that outfielder even fumbles the ball a little bit, we've got to be standing on second base. You know, and those are the kinds of things that when you create a competitive, you know, offensive practice or competitive base running, those are things that are easily accomplished for you, you know, once you get into the actual game situation. So those are the biggest things. I did put on here about pitchers throwing. I do, like, I know some people might look back at this later. I do want to make sure that everybody got the 12-month throwing program. It's a lot of information. So I sent that out to everybody. If anybody else needs it, let me know. But the 12-month throwing outline basically hammers every single thing that they should be doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think who asked you for that? The one coach from it was here 2 weeks ago. He asked you for that, so that was good. Was that an email?
Yeah, I sent it all in an email. So I can either resend it to you if you need it, but I did send it in an email from the hotcornerba@outlook.com. So it might have went to spam, but it's called the DC 12-month throwing program. Basically, I outline everything that the guy should be doing from January 1st all the way through December 31st. And it has daily outline in there. It has everything in there. And then what you can do is you can backtrack their throwing based on when you play. So, you know, if day 5 is a live pitching day and you pitch on Monday, so, you know, Monday's day 5. So we backtrack, you know, until we can make sure that they're on track to actually throw on day 5. If day 7 on there is the live day, then, you know, we backtrack from there too. So you can figure out, you know, when the guy should be throwing. And the last thing that I'll add, and I know that I always did this, and I know that, you know, a lot of coaches I know do this, you can use midweek games. So if you have a starter that needs to be ready for Friday and he has to throw a bullpen on Wednesday and you have a game, he can throw an inning or two in that game to get himself ready for Friday. I know a lot of coaches won't throw them, but the best bullpen is the live bullpen, right? So
yeah, we do that because basically it saves arms. Mostly it's you know, the closer on Monday will start on Friday.
Awesome.
Or Thursday, whatever the day.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff really matters for the longevity of the arm and those guys. So you know, you got anything else for me? I know that's kind of what I wanted to cover today, was going over practices.
No, just that we're gonna start getting into the weight room a little more as wrestling starts to wrap up. I'm gonna be doing Vertimax stuff with the kids for their speed and their core. We have a set core workout. We just call it the core before, so guys can come before practice and do that if they want to. And you know, those types of workouts are really good for all positions.
For sure.
And so that's basically what we're gonna do. As far as we're not gonna touch any weights. It's all band work and medicine ball stuff and core. So anything to add that you think we should be doing? You know, that'll be the month of February.
No, I think any type of rotational work from med balls is really good, and have it be as explosive as you can. If you can throw it into a wall, that'd be great. If not, to a partner is fine. You know, but any type of explosive work, so explosive jump throws, you know, any type of rotational throws. You could do a rotational throw from the hip. You can do a rotational throw from here where you load into the hip. Those kinds of things are really, really good for med ball stuff. Making sure they do both sides. So a lot of guys will only do dominant side. Making sure they do both sides is by far the most important piece of that. And then there's one called hurricane slams. Hurricane slams are really good. Those are stuff that we add in for power work. You know, if you go to YouTube and type in hurricane slam, med ball hurricane slams, those are really good too.
I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, we use those in our weight room all the time with our guys when we're doing power work. We've got a few of our pro guys.
I saw something you put up the other day. Stability, where guy was like catching the ball from a guy throwing, but he would had his back to him. I think it was you guys that put it up.
Yeah. Yep. That was us.
Yeah.
That was us. And that's all stability work. It's core stability stuff. That kind of stuff matters. That stuff is really good. I know our weight room guys do a good job with all that stuff. So if anybody, I mean, I know it's just you, but if anybody wants like med ball work, let me know. I can get you guys a plan and probably have some videos embedded into that. Just shoot me an email and I'll get that to you. There's a lot of different med ball stuff that we use and that we do. So, we can definitely help with that stuff too, for sure. So that's the biggest thing. When you're limited on space and resources, med balls, core stuff, sprints are huge because sprints help with power. That kind of stuff really matters. I know if anybody wants to get more powerful, sprint and give yourself a ton of rest in between. Like, don't sprint until you're going to die. Like, do a sprint and give yourself 2 minutes in between a sprint so that you can actually be fully recovered, or a minute, so that you can actually be fully recovered before the next one. That's how you become more powerful. So those are the kinds of things that, no matter what space you have, you can get those done.
Yeah, the running. I mean, I can even do that in the hall. So
For sure.
yeah, we have done. Well,
So, all right, well,
do me that medicine ball workout, because I'll pick and choose based on, like time and space. I'm disappointed that we don't have a wall to throw to. I'm going to try it, but if I break the wall, I'll get in trouble, but I don't really care. I'm going to retire in a couple of years. I don't care. Won't be able to fix it anyway. So.
That's right. But yeah, I'll get that sent to you. I'll get this link done. I'll throw it up on YouTube. I'll send it out to you guys so you can send it to everybody. What I might do is I might just send the YouTube link to everybody too, so they can actually watch it. And then from there, I'll get some medicine ball stuff out to you guys and kind of go from there.
All right. Great, Coach. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for everything.
All right. Take
All
care.
right, take care.